But I was at my house, and this room feels a lot better temperature-wise than my house.
I could have even worn a jacket. You know, if I was like, I gotta have something really cool.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Pleased to have you here. I know it's, almost summer. The weather's nice outside. Appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us. Those of you that are here in the room, those of you that are watching online, thank you so much. If you're not online, if you are online, you won't be able to see the little thing, but I'll just give a brief welcome, which is this. I'm Lincoln Fillmore, your state senator. With me is Susan Pulsipher, who is many of your representative. Jordan Tusher, who usually joins us at these events, is out of town today and was not able to make it. But anyway, we're still very happy to have you here. Welcome and thank you. I'll give you a brief update about what's going on that I think is most immediately relevant. Susan will do the same. Most of our time will be filled answering your questions. If you're watching online, you can feel free to type your questions in the comment section, and we've got people watching that who will tell us what's on your mind. Anyway, so thank you so much for coming. By way of update, you guys probably saw in the news or not, depending on how closely you follow the granular details of state government. But the governor issued a call on Friday for the legislature to be in a special session on Wednesday. And so we will have a special session on Wednesday. It's not going to be a particularly meaningful special legislative session, but there are a couple of technical changes that need to change. I'll go over a couple of those. So earlier in the general session this year, we passed, that you worked on quite a bit, so you can talk more about that if you'd like to, but a bill on how to split school districts. I think in the final version of that bill that passed, it left unanswered the question of what happens if a city is going to be on two different ballot questions, or if there is more than one proposal to split school districts and more than one of them passes. So we're going to come and try to clean that up because Alpine School District is really going through some growing pains, and there may be like 2 or 3 different proposals to split different cities and form different school districts. So we just feel like we need to have the rules set ahead of time for clarity's sake. Another bill has to do with energy and a coal-fired power plant that's down in Millard County that's being decommissioned by its owners. That bill passed. The governor was going to veto it. Instead of vetoing it, he said he'd sign it, but we'd have to come back and make some changes. So this is we'll be making some minor changes to that. I voted against the original bill. And then there's some technical type changes to the sunset procedure. One reason why it's important to craft that in a special session is because it makes changes to many different sections of state code. And if you do that during a general session, it just becomes really labor intensive for staff to draft new bills according to new standards. Does that make sense? So it's kind of better to tackle that recodification in June so that by the time the regular session comes up and we're passing 500 bills that they can be drafted. Susan, would you want to say anything about that or whatever else you're working on?
Yeah. So I will add something, and this is why sometimes we have to have a special session, because sometimes we pass legislation and then as we proceed just even this far, we run into a thing that says, oh, this is not going to work the way we didn't see this, we didn't anticipate this, or something's changed, or a date in the coal plant, there were some dates that were incorrect that didn't work. And so we kind of have to sometimes do special sessions that in many ways are cleanup things so they'll work, because we can't have things that don't work. And this is why I actually love our legislative process, because I think it helps us. It's out there, it's in the open, and we have the opportunity to make changes if they're needed. Yeah. As Lincoln mentioned, there's the bill that was passed is really great for splitting school districts. We fixed a lot of things, but we didn't anticipate. Really, I wouldn't have even thought that, now 3 different groups are going to try to do it at the exact same time. I guess I kind of would have thought they'd work together, but that's not happening. And so we have to clarify it, just so that it doesn't become, what do I vote for? Here's 3 different choices here, and that would be very confusing. So there's some good things with that. So I just wanted you to know, and maybe I can talk about it a little bit more, but even though I am not running for re-election, as I mentioned in our last meeting, you hired me till the end of December, and I plan to continue working for you until the end of December. And in so doing, I am working on policy development. Obviously, I won't be the bill sponsor because I won't be in the session this next year, but I have others who will. And I'm working on policy development in the child care sector, which is something I've been working on for several years, and I've got some really good things. I've got a great group I'm working with, and we've got some really good things that I'm looking forward to. And there's, some things with reports for education. I've been working on that for several years, and once again, I'm in meetings all this summer to try to create some policy. We're not done with that yet. We've made great progress, but we're not done. So I intend to continue, and that's what I'm working on. So,
okay. Well, great. Thank you. Now I'd like to open it up for questions. Most of you here in the room, I think, have been here before, so you know how this works, right? You raise your hand, and I'll call on you, and we'll ask questions. And go ahead. You can have question number 1. Hold on. Anybody else? 2, 3. Okay. We'll go to that point. Yes?
I just would like, you talked about the possible sales tax increase concerning the National Hockey League team that's been proposed to come and sales tax increase.
Okay. So you're talking about Senate Bill 272, I think, that passed in the legislative session, that authorized Salt Lake City to increase sales taxes within Salt Lake City for the purposes of improving a section of the downtown core. So that's what that bill does. As far as I know, there were some updates on that this week, right? There was like a new proposal before the city that came before the city's planning commission, and I think the planning commission did not approve that. So the question is really in the hands of the Salt Lake City Council. If the Salt Lake City Council chooses to increase sales tax within Salt Lake City, they have the power to do that. It won't affect any of us out here except to the degree that we shop and pay sales taxes within Salt Lake City. But it's not for a hockey stadium, but rather for improvements to the downtown district. Let me tell you some things that were talked about during the process of what they might want to use some of that money for. If you're familiar enough with downtown, you know that 100 South used to go all the way across, and now it stops at the Salt Palace, which happened when they extended the Salt Palace in the 1990s. So that kind of has bisected downtown. I think what Salt Lake City and Salt Lake County would like to do is to change the Salt Palace so that instead of being a big, wide convention center, is to add a second level so that they can have 2 major ballrooms and host double conferences at the same time. There had been some talk of improving Abravanel Hall. It's a 50-year-old building. So I think there was some desire to improve it. I mean, every building needs retrofitting every now and again. As Salt Lake County went in to see how much it would cost to retrofit, they found that it was a pretty comparable price to rebuilding Abravanel Hall. I think that's been maybe more controversial since it's become public, and it seems like that's probably not likely to happen, but that was at least part of the discussion during the process. And then I think there's a thought to make 300 West go underground so that pedestrians could walk pretty safely across, in that thing that spans, say, you've got the Gateway and then the Delta Center, and then you've got Abravanel Hall and the Salt Palace over on this side, right? To make that more pedestrian-friendly would probably mean running 300 South down underground in the way that, or 300 West in the way that 200 West does now. So those were some of the projects that were talked about. But again, all of those decisions are going to be up to Salt Lake City.
Yeah. And just in context, as we talked about it last year, there is concern that our downtown Salt Lake City area is not as customer friendly. We want it to be a place that people will go and will want to go for sports events, for fine arts events, for shopping, for whatever. And there was concern about the crime and some other things that are that we see in downtown that might stop some people, and there was a desire to improve that. And I think it's something that we need to talk about and we need to think about. My concern, as I mentioned, with that bill was simply I wanted to not do it until I had the plan, kind of knew what we were talking about. And yes, it is Salt Lake City's. All we did is give Salt Lake City the opportunity to choose and to raise taxes if they wanted. But I was hoping to see it kind of fleshed out. Over the years, there's been a lot of talk about how to help clean up Salt Lake City or make it nicer and better. And I just wanted to see the plan a little bit further down the line before we voted on it. So that was my concern. But does it need to happen? You need to with your cities. You need to, in whatever city you live in, you need to stop and say, okay, we did this a long time ago. Where are we now? So that was my thought.
I appreciate that question. Mm-hmm. Who had question 2? Yes.
Sorry, just a second. I wanted to ask about fluoride in the water.
Okay.
And I sent you. And
that was from you. Okay, great. I haven't replied yet.
Yeah, that's fine. Anyway, I'd like to see fluoride removed from the water.
Me too.
There's a lot of issues with having fluoride in the water. I don't know if anybody else knows about that, but one of which is it removes iodine from your thyroid. It makes bones brittle. It's linked to reduced IQ in children. It inhibits proper immune function and decreases ATP. ATP is produced out of mitochondria, which is actually the energy that we use. So I would just like to encourage you to sponsor a bill
Thank you.
that removes it from our water.
All right. So that was just an encouragement rather than a question.
Yeah. Well, I guess the follow-up question is, if you agree with me, why haven't we done it yet? What are the obstacles?
I think the major obstacle is that the voters voted to put it in.
Okay.
It wasn't a legislative action that put it in, right? It was a ballot question. I was a 20-year-old. I voted against it, but it passed. Fluoride is the only thing we put in our water that is not about safe to drink. There are additives, right? We put chlorine in the water, right? All of those things that kill germs, that make it safe to drink. Fluoride is the one thing we put in water that has nothing to do with making it safe to drink.
In order to get fluoride as a supplement, you have to get a prescription to get it. And here we are essentially saying everybody has a blanket prescription.
Yeah, I cared about this issue a lot when it was on the ballot, which isn't to say I don't care now. I just mean back then, really, when I was 20 and was nobody, right? It was just like a delegate who was just like, why are we forcing people to take medication that they may or may not want, was my position. But I tell you, the dentist lobby was pretty persuasive, and they got it on the ballot, and the voters approved it. Yeah, and beyond that, it's also very super inconvenient for Jordan Valley Water Conservancy districts, which services Draper City, but Draper City spans Salt Lake and Utah counties. Salt Lake County requires their water to be fluoridated. Utah County doesn't. And so Jordan Valley Water Conservancy has to spend all this money to be able to differentiate the things that serve the Utah County portion of Draper have to be treated differently than those that serve the Salt Lake County portion of Draper. So I agree. I don't know the answer to that question about whether or not the legislature could do something about that. I mean, obviously we can. There's a county action. But I think the major obstacle is it was a county level decision that was approved by the voters. That doesn't mean it might not be time for it to be revisited by the voters, but I think that we're more likely to get action if it happened at the county level rather than state level, because it was a county level decision, and I don't mean to monopolize.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
Fine.
I was just saying, in order for me to remove the fluoride from the water, I have to get a reverse osmosis filter, which if I just get one, it's $500 or $600 under the sink with
Yeah.
a little fancy tap, and it's slow.
Does Brita take the fluoride out of the water?
It's not.
All right.
I'll leave it as that, completely does. And if you do a whole home system, it's more money. And I'm not the only one that's affected by this. Everybody in the room drinks that fluoride water. You're poisoning your children when they come in for the summer. And they won't.
Have you talked to your representative on the county council?
Next up.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry, this is the.
I appreciate it. It's good to bring it up with me, but I think you're more likely to see action on it at the county level rather than the state level. And did you have a follow-up on that same topic? No. Okay, then I'll move to question 3, and then I'll let you go.
Yeah, this is kind of a crystal ball kind of thing, but do you anticipate the upcoming presidential election having a big impact on our state and the state legislature coming up? Or not even considered it?
Yes, of course, I'll repeat the question. Sorry. Everyone, I hope you gathered that last question we were talking about fluoride. This question is about, do we anticipate that the presidential election will have an impact, a big impact? So I would say the answer to that question is unequivocally yes. The news from yesterday about Denver shipping illegal immigrants to Salt Lake City, right, I think is one reason why. Immigrate, if you could pick any number of national policies that have changed with the current administration as opposed to the prior one, immigration, I think, would have to be at the top of the list, right? It's just like a totally different approach in how that's handled and totally different results. So, yes, I anticipate whoever wins the next election, specifically on immigration, will have a big impact on our state and will require legislative action to try to fix it. Susan, go ahead.
Yeah, whatever happens in Washington always has an impact on Utah and in South Jordan City and whatever cities we live in. I think public lands is something we've been talking with the federal government about for a long time, and that can have an impact depending on not only who's in the White House, but who's in Congress. And those things really do have. I mean, our public lands, Utah's, 66% by the federal government. So clearly, what happens at the federal level has a big impact on Utah and how they handle things. So it does make a difference. Like I say, not just who's in the White House, but who's in Congress has makes a big difference, and we've generally not had too much trouble with our congressional delegation agreeing with us. It's all the rest of the congressional delegate from all the other states would be great if they could see things our way a little bit more.
Let's so we'll have
follow up to that.
Oh yeah.
Does South Jordan, do we have many illegal immigrants in South Jordan?
Has
anyone ever?
So you're saying illegal and immigrants, there's.
Yeah, I was trying to be politically correct.
No, and.
Do we take a survey? Do we know? And question number 2, do our South Jordan police officers have the right to stop people and ask for their ID? Et cetera.
Yeah.
Do we have a problem in South Jordan?
What we do know is that, I don't know how many are in South Jordan. What we do know is in Jordan School District, there are a lot of immigrants. Now, I'm not saying they're illegal because I know a lot of them are legal, but there are a lot. And I don't know, how many are legal or illegal actually, and John might even know exactly how many, but I know there's a lot in Jordan School District. There's a lot all over our state. So we do have a lot of immigrants. Illegal, I'm not sure, and I'm not sure what the police, do you know what the police can do?
So your question is, how does this impact South Jordan? I don't think that there is a count of people who've been relocated and might have chosen South Jordan. There's not a registry of them. Let me start. The federal government is failing to protect the border in innumerable ways, and there are lots of downstream consequences. And can police do it? No. According to the Constitution, immigration is a federal matter. Even states who have passed laws to empower state police to enforce already existing federal immigration law, courts have enjoined and declared those laws to be unconstitutional. So no, police in America do not have the power to go up to you and say, show me your papers, which is a very good thing. But also, beyond that, they do not state police do not have the power to enforce federal immigration law. Okay, hold on. So, okay, yeah, we can stay on immigration for a minute.
Any assurance to you, E-Verify and I-9 has helped reduce that amount in business. And that's one of the things that Utah has done to try to
Yeah.
address that problem. And those are the sort of things that they can do. The thing is that you'd have to be creative in coming up with laws that don't conflict with the Constitution.
Sure. So you just had, I'm just repeating you for the sake of our online listeners. You mentioned E-Verify, right? Steps that the legislature has taken over time to try to address maybe the magnet, right? This is like we require businesses to check the immigration status of people that they hire. Did you follow up on the same topic?
Yes.
Okay.
What kind of supports does the legislature propose to support public schools as they get an influx of immigrants and asylum seekers and all those kids that are
And your question is, how is the legislature addressing this from a funding standpoint at the school level? It has not done so yet, other than with the at-risk add-on. That's not immigrant-specific. It addresses a lot of the same types of demographic issues, so it increases funding. That is something that Susan and I jointly are looking at because we chair the Education Budget Committee. And so that is, it's a bigger problem now than it was 5 years ago. So it's something that's on our radar, our committee. Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. Also, a couple of years ago, maybe 2 years ago, we did run a bill that made it easier for kids to get in an appropriate grade. So when you come into the schools, then they ask to see all your paperwork from where you came from to know what grade level and your, test scores and all of that. The difficulty, and this is not necessarily illegal immigrants, this is immigrants in general, many of who did have to leave their country quickly. And sometimes, they did not bring all their paperwork with them. And there was a problem when they would come and try to get in schools because there was nothing that the parents had to substantiate, where they were academically and what they had. And so we did pass a bill a couple of years ago that provided a way for that to happen and that the kids could get into school and, to cut through that. So that was one thing that we did to kind of help with that situation.
And I want to close on this topic, although if you guys want to hear more about it, that's fine. But Utah is actually, is a pretty welcoming place, right? Refugees come here. We have robust programs for support. I think that, people find that if they come and knock on our front door and say, I would really like to be part of your community and I need a little bit of temporary help, is that okay? That our answer is almost always yes. It becomes a real problem when people try to sneak in the back door over the fence, right? So at the federal level, we really need to reform our legal immigration process. We need to enforce what the laws are, right? The truth is, if you don't enforce the law, then it's almost like it's not there, right? So there are real problems here. But, Carlos Moreno, I don't know if any of you guys know him. He's not in my district, but if you're on the west side of this county, he's running for county council. And he's an immigrant from Venezuela who faces this same kinds of these situations, right? He came here to study abroad right about the time that Hugo Chavez was taking over his country. He spoke out about him. And so the government of Venezuela named him an enemy of the state while he was here going to college, right? I don't think that he intended to move to Utah and make this his permanent home, but to hear him talk about how Utah and America have treated him, he just talks about the miracle that America is. But he did it the right way, right? I don't know if you guys watched, he marched in the South Jordan Parade, and he probably had 100 other immigrants marching down our parade, carrying American flags. I feel so proud of our country at times like that. And I wish that we would be willing to welcome with open arms those who knock on our front door, but keep our back door locked, right? All right, so I will give you question 4. Who else has questions that we want to talk about? 5 and 6, okay? And is there anything online? they must love the questions that we're asking. Go ahead.
I'm not sure how familiar you are with the Downwinder program. And I'm wondering if you are elected for Senate, if you will be willing to write a bill for that, because Senator Lee said he would, and he let the old one fall out on
Yeah.
the 10th of June.
Sure.
And that left all the people that are left on the Downwinder program with nothing. Just because he did not keep his word, and he would, and there was a bill written by someone else that included that, but he wouldn't vote for it.
Okay. So you ask about the Downwinder program, which I'm repeating for the sake of the people online. So that's been a federal program. It's been considered in Washington, D.C. We, in the state legislature, we really wouldn't have a vote on that program. Because it was a federal issue. It dealt with the federal nuclear testing and how the fallout would, basically move downwind and how that affected the health and well-being of people who live downwind of the nuclear test site. So the federal government did launch this program many years ago. You're saying it's expired and are disappointed in Senator Lee's response and his votes related to that program. But as it's a federal issue resulting from federal action, we really wouldn't have a say on that in the state legislature. But I'm sure that I would support a strongly worded resolution in the legislature to encourage our federal delegation to continue to protect those who suffered from the downwind.
Talk about how proud you are of your country, and I think how they let thousands and thousands die with their tests, and Utah was hit worse. They had the highest miscarriage rate over those years, the highest stillborns, the highest mental retardation of children born, the highest of cancer victims, of which my family have no history of cancer all through the generations, except my immediate family that was living there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, because it was a federal program. Yeah, as members of the legislature in Utah, we don't have much of a ability to affect that, except as a resolution where we can just send back to Washington and say, this is what we think, please do it.
Yeah, but where your question was, would I draft a bill? We just don't have the power to do that.
Yeah,
It's not
right.
in the House.
It's not.
Was it in Lee's power?
Yes.
Because he's in Congress, and it was a federal program,
So we just,
so it was his.
I'm not going to speak for Senator Lee.
No.
well,
But you might want to, if you're concerned, this is a big concern to you, talk to those people that are running for Congress in our 4 congressional districts and our Senate.
Yeah, now would be a great time to talk to one of the 4 candidates who are running for the U.S. Senate seat, right? Now is the time when they will be more responsive than ever. Okay? You follow up on Downwinders?
Senator Lee's having town hall meetings like this, right? He had one this morning at 10:30. I'm sure you can get in front of him again.
Okay, great. Thank you. You had question 5?
Yeah. I noticed in your last campaign that you filmed.
You're talking to me specifically?
Yeah.
Okay.
You filmed at the Hope Family Farmstead.
Yes.
Do you have some sway as far as getting that property finished? The house is still a shell.
Oh, sure. You're talking about the house, the old Aunt Mame's old house, right? Yeah. I don't. That's a city park.
I understand it's a city park, but I'm just wondering what your role could be as a legislator.
So Patrick Harris, who's my representative on the city council, is a neighbor. I'll talk to him about it. I don't know that the city ever planned to finish that house, but I'll be happy to talk to him about it.
The family that donated the property.
Oh, okay.
And it
So you and I are probably 4th cousins somewhere. Okay. Okay, awesome. Thank you. So the city will fund that. But I'm sort of talking. It's the city's park. The state can't does not fund local parks.
the legislature, can you do anything to promote those kinds of projects?
I'd say as a citizen with maybe a little bit more access and sway over the city council, I would be happy to talk to my representative, who's also my neighbor, but would encourage you to do the same thing if you haven't done already.
Yeah.
Okay?
Same, and I'm happy. I actually have the same city council member who's my rep, and I'm happy to talk, and others, you know.
Patrick Harris. He's in my ward.
Yeah.
He's my ministering companion.
Oh, well, I know him really well, but I don't live by him. But I can talk to him and others, and I think we've spoken. I'm supportive of it. So.
Okay. You had 6? One of you two? You had 6. Okay.
Okay, so the state of Utah has done a fantastic job with the budget
Okay.
in some areas. And as someone who's been working for over 50 years, I was wondering, what are the chances of Social Security no longer being taxed?
Okay. So your question is, thank you for the compliment. You're right. The state does a pretty good job on its budget most of the time. It's still too big, and we fund some things that we shouldn't. But your question is about the taxation of Social Security, right? So Social Security, most Social Security income in Utah is not subject to income tax. But over a certain income level, it is subject to state income tax. And your question is, what are the chances that will go away? Not knowing your age, and I won't ask, so I can't say I don't know how close you are to receiving Social Security. I'd say the chances of it ultimately going away are pretty good, but it will probably happen in pieces. So over the last 5 years or so, the state has taken out 3 pretty large chunks to the point where probably 80 to 90% of Social Security income in Utah is non-taxed. But at and I don't even want to say at the very high level, but if somebody who receives Social Security income, if their total income is over, then all of their Social Security income is taxed, right? So I mean, at the top end, Social Security is taxed. For most Utahns, Social Security is not taxed, and we've been making progress on that score, and I'd anticipate that progress would continue.
Yeah, I've been kind of a co-sponsor of this legislation for the last 5 years, and we started out where the only way your Social Security was not taxed is if your income was so low that no matter where your income came from, it wouldn't be taxed. So, you know, like $30,000 or less. And then each year we raised that a little bit. You know, we went to, $40,000 or whatever, and 50, I think our last one was, I think we were close.
70.
Yeah, up to 75. But that's total income combined with a joint filing jointly. So it's total income filing jointly. So if you're getting also money from other areas, then that is included. And this last year there was a proposal to go up to 80 in the 80,000s, but this year we had a leaner year, so it didn't pass. But yeah, there is effort every year to keep increasing that. It's just hard to take all at once because trying to be very fiscally conservative and being careful with our budget, we don't want to take it a giant and not know where we're going to be. So, but every year, it has increased to a pretty good place, but it does include your entire income.
Well, just as a follow-up, whenever you take a tax from one area, you got to make it up.
Yeah.
And if you take it from wealthy people that are getting Social Security and it ends up hurting people that aren't wealthy, I think leaving it on Social Security is the way to go.
Well, and that's kind of why we're doing it incrementally, is to see what the effect would be and how it will work. And you're right, because it includes your whole income, not just your Social Security portion of your income.
All right. Anybody have a 7? Anybody else? All right, go ahead. You have 8. All right.
Just because I sometimes get stuck in tunnel vision, I'm just wondering from your vantage point, what you feel like the biggest issues in our area and in the state are.
Right now, affordable housing is a big issue. People are talking about that and feeling it, and it's across the state, but it's really across the nation too. It's a big issue. In the state of Utah, we've been working on this issue for quite a while and making some great progress, but transportation is still an issue. because we keep growing and people keep building houses, and which is great, except then you have to figure out what you're going to do. So that's been something that we've made great progress on, but we continue to grow. The continues to grow. And I mean, those are things that we hear about a lot. There's always lots of, I mean, education is a perennial issue that we keep working on and trying to address the issues that come up there. You have a couple?
Yeah, so really would build off of what you said, Susan. Your question is about what do we think is like the big issues that face Utah, and I think that the major issues facing us are almost all ancillary to growth, right? Housing affordability is a problem across the country, but it's more acute here because we are the fastest growing state in the country. And traffic is a situation in most cities. Salt Lake City and state Utah becomes, from shifting to being kind of a small major city and a small state to really being, Salt Lake City's turning into a pretty big city, and a really large metropolitan area, bigger than Cincinnati metropolitan area, bigger than Kansas City, bigger than San Diego. We face some of the same traffic problems, and in our area, where we are the fastest growing area of this county, and one of the fastest growing areas in the fastest growing state in the country, traffic is a big issue here. Housing affordability is a big issue here. The reliability, long-term water supply is a big issue here. We've been taking a lot of steps. I think on housing specifically, in the last 2 years, the state has taken a lot of action to address that, but we don't yet see the results of that. Largely because it just takes time. We instituted a couple of new ways to be able to fund housing in this high interest rate environment to make it more cost effective to be able to build single family housing. The state has actually, I think, contributed to the problem of housing affordability by providing too many incentives to build high density apartments. What people don't want, when we should have been incentivizing the construction of either staying out of the market completely or providing incentive to be able to provide single family housing that people can buy at an entry-level salary, right? You graduate from college, you get married, you make $50,000 or $60,000 a year, something like that. There's just literally nothing in our market to be able to buy. And if we don't replace that first rung on the home ownership ladder, it's going to carry major consequences as that generation of people grows up and just can never get to the point where they can invest in that appreciating asset that ends up being the source of most families' wealth as they age, right? So anyway, those I'd say are what I think are the major issues. And you can, but let me make one other point. The type of growth that we're seeing is different, right? So our population is increasing and at a pace that's more rapid than any other state in the country, at least over the last 10 years. On the other hand, our student population is decreasing, right? So for the first time, we're going to see a larger population with fewer kids in school. And that's, I don't know, that presents a challenge for us. Even with immigration, the immigration, we talked earlier about, the growing number of immigrants in schools, who don't speak English yet, and they need to learn, that level of basics in order to be successful in American public schools. But the overall student population is declining, and that's not true in Jordan, where people are moving in. But on a statewide level, the number of kids is declining, which also represents a major problem, because if we can't replace, if the top end of our becomes an inverted pyramid instead of like a cylinder, it really creates problems for the state financially over a long term. Yeah.
Yeah, and back to the housing. I'm just wondering really what role the government should have in that.
Yeah.
Why it should be so involved.
Well, and that's a really, really good question, because essentially it's a market-driven issue, and the solution can't be too much government. And we've worked on it and we've talked about it, but our solutions are somewhat limited, and do try to take that into consideration. That what can we do? There's other things that we have talked about that affect that a little bit, and that is, I have kids that live in other states, and I go visit them, and they're kind of like the city and then like a big wheel, and you move out from there. But Utah is actually a valley. The Wasatch Front, you've got mountains on both sides, and when you're kind of going north and south, and the east and west is not as big of an issue. And so you look at, again, economic development. It can't all be right on the Wasatch Front. It can't be on I-15. And we have talked about that, and that is one thing that we can do a little bit about, and we've talked about it, is trying to encourage economic development in rural Utah, in other places that isn't I-15, because then that helps with a lot of the problems we've just identified, they still will have transportation needs wherever it goes, but there's things like that we've worked on and we have talked about. There's and again, I think the reason why you may not have seen like major housing issues, I mean, we have done things, but we're also very aware that we have to tread carefully to make sure that we don't also have a side effect with government getting involved with the market forces. So.
And I want to ask you a question back, and I can throw this out to the room. In your opinion, should there be any limits on what you can build on property that you own? Hang on just. I'm not trying to get it.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Think that that's,
Yeah.
But I completely understand that we live in a community.
Right.
And that we have to be mindful of our neighbors and our community.
Yeah.
And those around us. We're not
Right.
single entities.
Okay. Right. So I just want to restate what you're saying here. It's like, yes, people have individual property rights, but we also live in a community, right? And so I get that. But that is where the rub is when you talk about why should the government be involved. That is the answer to that question. For better or for worse, in America, land use is governed by the government, right? You cannot put a house on your property without the government's permission. You cannot put a swimming pool in your yard without the government's permission. You cannot turn your basement into an apartment without the government's permission, right? And that's all handled at the local level. So from a state government standpoint, what I would say, and normally we have some city council people who come to these meetings and will argue with what I'm saying here, and there are none here today, so I just get to go on, and if they're online. But cities have the power to regulate land use, right? And that's not new. It's been that way as long as I think anyone in this room has been alive. So from the state government standpoint, we worry if local governments are using that authority to not approve the kinds of housing that people actually want to buy, and the state does not always get it right. And I said before that the state was a major contributor to this problem by incentivizing the construction of too many apartments, right? We provided financial tools, and I say we, this is before I think either one of us were in the legislature, but the state provided financial tools to cities and developers to build all the apartments that you see going up in Harriman and in South Jordan, and that's particularly true around transit stops. I think that exacerbated the affordability problem because we provided all these incentives. So we saw a lot of private construction dollars in the market to build apartments, which just sucked money away from the construction of small, affordable homes that people could buy. From my standpoint, I think that the steps that the legislature has taken over the last 2 years since I've been the chair of the Housing Affordability Commission has been to try to undo the mistake that the state made earlier by no longer giving favored treatment just to construction of high-density apartments around transit stops. Okay? Thank you.
I have a follow-up.
Yeah.
When that happened and the legislature passed that,
Oh, of course, yeah. Yes. You're asking where, yeah. So there are a number, this gets overblown in the media, but there are a number of legislators who work in the real estate and development industry. There are a fair number of those. But I don't know what to say about that. They're elected by their constituents, so they get the same vote that we all do. Okay. Somebody else had a question. Yeah, go ahead.
Another big concern that moves up and down in priorities depending on what else is going on is air quality. How do you feel that we're doing so far, and there's still a ways to go, and how do you see the future?
Okay. Great. Good question. Your question is about air quality and how the state is doing and how we see the future. I'm not going to give credit to the state government. Utah is doing a great job with air quality. And we live in a valley, and, the geography of our area traps the air here, right? And there's nothing I think that anybody could do. I haven't seen the technology yet that would install big fans at the point of the mountain to blow the air out, right? We're dependent on Mother Nature to be able to get the storm systems to clear our air out every once in a while. It doesn't happen as often as we'd like. In a normal circumstance, about 53% of the particulates, that cause air pollution in Utah come from cars, people driving to work. The most important thing the legislature did to address that issue was a few years ago by providing an incentive to convert Utah's 3 oil refineries to produce Tier 3 gasoline. That cut down on those particulates by about a third, right? The biggest contributor, and knocked off 33%. That happens over time, but most gas that's sold and burned in Utah is refined at Utah's 3 refining plants. So that was a major step forward. But even before that passed, Utah's population is rapidly increasing, but air quality continues to get better. That's why I say I think Utah overall is doing a very good job. But it's not, some of that is government policy, but it's also improving technology and things like that. By the way, about 30% of Utah's air particulates, about 35% comes from people heating their homes and businesses. And then about 13% of the pollution in Utah's air in a normal time comes from all heavy industry combined, which is the refining of that fuel and Kennecott copper. All of that heavy industry combined accounts for 13%. So fairly, a comparatively small piece. Anyway, Utah on air quality is overall doing quite well. I think the best thing that we can do for air quality is to let technology continue to improve. I imagine that the amount of pollution that comes from cars is going to go down significantly as the market is more amenable to electric cars. And I know that there are governments outside of Utah that are really trying to take steps to make that happen faster. If we do make that happen faster, we also have to be willing to generate the electricity that it takes to power electric cars. We have nowhere near that infrastructure today. And the federal policy, like in so many ways, is really schizophrenic, right? It's like what we're going to do is really push people to buy electric cars and really limit the amount of electricity that we can generate in the country. And that's going to be a bit of a problem. In Utah, we passed a bill several years ago that I sponsored that put $50 million, not taxpayer money, into building a network of electric vehicle charging stations around the state. Recognize it. If electric vehicles are coming, and they are, there's got to be a way for people to pull off and charge their car, and that it needs to be at least competitive with how convenient it is to get gas in an internal combustion engine. I don't want to monopolize.
No, you're fine. No, and I love it when, yes, Utah, if you look at the data in 1930 and 1980, we are really much better with a way larger population. Our air quality is much better than it was in 1980 and even beyond. So we are doing, and I do think it, and I love it when private enterprise finds solutions. And thinking again of electric automobiles, but yeah, then you've got to have electricity, and we get electricity sometimes from hydro, and that works just really well as long as we don't have a drought, from water. and we get it from we can get it from wind as long as the wind blows. We can get it from sun as long as the sun shines. And so what we need to do is come up, and I love that private enterprises are looking to those solutions. I actually saw, I was at my daughter's in Arizona, and it was like amazing. We went to this grocery store, and it was like it had covered parking. It's like, what grocery store has covered parking? This is great, especially in Arizona, right? In the summer, it's hot. And come to find out, the covered parking were solar panels. And they generated the electricity for the store. And I'm like, this is a great idea. And again, private enterprise, love it that they're doing things. A couple of years ago, I was at a meeting where they were talking about something. Haven't had an update, so I don't know where it is, but a place in Utah was working on taking food waste, like restaurants and so on, food waste, and they had a way to turn that into
Fuel?
Yeah, fuel.
For a car?
Yes.
Yeah, buy some.
Yeah, that you could put in with gas in a car, and this fuel that you could get making it with that produce actually had no pollution when it was run in a car. And it's like, I love it when technology and private enterprise are coming up with really, really good solutions to help us. And we need to stay out of their way and let them do it.
I would like to make one more comment on this air quality issue. So federal government recently has instituted new standards that are just unachievable here, largely because of geography, to the point where even if Utah stopped driving our cars and stopped heating our homes and stopped burning all of our heavy industry, we would still not qualify, because if there's ever anything that happens in California, the air moves, right? And it comes across to us, up north of the Great Salt Lake, and it settles in our valley, and the mountains keep it here. And I think that creates a real problem, and our state is working to push back on that federal standard, where we're being punished for the fact that we have gorgeous mountains. That I think we all love having them here, right? I love the snow that comes with them. I love to hike in them. I don't ski, but I'm so glad that they're there for people who do that. But the real downside to the mountains is they trap air in the valley, for better or for worse. Okay? So that was question 9. Yes, Brian.
We have a question that asks, if you could wave your magic wand, what would be the one policy or thing that you would change in the state of Utah that would be most beneficial long term?
So if I could wave a magic wand, what one policy would I implement in the state of Utah? If I really had that kind of power, I would wave it in Washington, D.C. Utah has a good... So the real problem with what we see in Congress is the incentives are all mixed up, right? And they just spend so much time... Do you ever feel... This is how I feel. Politicians in Washington, and again, I'm not trying to single out any person, but just say you watch, and it seems to me that what they want the most is to be able to blame the other team for all the bad things that happen. And I think that's true of both parties that tend to trade power back and forth in a pretty closely divided, politically divided country. I would love to be able to wave my wand and get rid of that. That incentive. But we don't have that here. And I think part of that is because the Republican Party dominates here. And so the Republicans can do what they want. You know what I mean? And for whatever, Republicans are going to get the credit or the blame for what goes on in Utah. We have supermajorities of our voters and supermajorities in the legislature. But even despite that, the two parties in Utah are able to work pretty closely together. And I would like to be able to wave that wand over all of the people that represent us in Congress and have them be much more interested in trying to solve an issue like immigration. But we really do have a situation where both parties would rather have the problems that currently exist so that they can blame the other side for them instead of to try to solve the problem.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Not that there aren't things that Utah needs to fix or change or whatever. After all, I mean, we passed, 600 bills in a session, so there are obviously things that we need to work on or fix. But major, like you're talking about, next week I'm participating in a meeting with House Republican caucus. It's the committee chair. Anyway, looking forward to the future. And there's a question they ask us to answer. It goes along with what you're saying, and it's a fascinating question. And the question is, well, how would you like Utah to look in 2050? So in 25 years. And I thought about it. And as I talked to a few people, and then I talked to actually quite a few people. And I called people and said, how would you answer this question? My constituents, I called many people, and it's a great question. And this is the thing that's really interesting. Many answers that came to that question were keep this going. Keep our good budgeting fiscal policies going. I would hope that would continue. I would hope that some of the good things we're doing would continue. I mean, they did say, I would like to have solutions to our growth, the traffic, and some of these other things. They were mentioned also. And because those are just the problems, with actually our good economy. And the fact that it's such a great place to live. People want to live here. Anyway, I think we need to, kind of like Lincoln said, I think we just need to be really careful and watchful. Not that there aren't things we need to do, but we need to be careful and watchful that we don't slide, that we keep our state in a really, really good place and continue down that path. And also, another thing that people said is, I would hope it's a place that has strong families and strong communities. And I thought that was really interesting too, because again, we've talked a little bit about this. There's a lot that happens at the city level, at the county level, and keeping those cities strong and those counties strong and allowing them to make those decisions is good. Because anytime you take too much authority too high up, there's a time and a place for it, but you have to be careful about that. But so that kind of goes along. That question was a fantastic question. I've thought so much about it in the last couple of weeks since it was asked of me, and I've had some great comments. But that's what people have responded.
I have a follow-up on that. Do you think the difference is because people in Utah and our leadership is focused on the problems, the processes, and that sort of thing, and not so much on personalities and I'm better than you, the back and forth, that sort of thing?
Well, I will tell you, during my years in the legislature, I didn't know what I was going to find when I came to the legislature. And I was so pleased, because what I found was the process. Now, I'm not saying that I agree with everything everyone does, because I don't. But the process, I love. And I love that anyone can come, anyone in the entire world can come to our legislative session and speak for or against a bill. I love that. I love that it's open that way. I love that we have, even as in the House and the Senate, we have some pretty tight rules. And I learned very quickly when I became a legislator that when you speak on the House floor, you have to push your button, and then the speaker calls on you, and you stand up and you speak to the speaker. Even if and then someone will ask you a question, and when you answer the question to the speaker, not to the person that asked you the question. You don't even turn and look at them really. You look, well, Mr. Speaker, this. And it just keeps us so that we can progress and do our business in a nicer way. And I love that. The process is really good, and I hope that never changes. And I think that is one of our reasons.
I mean, honestly, if you ever forget about that, just go live in another state.
Yeah.
Because
Thank you.
the fourth state I've lived in, and the first one where it doesn't feel like state government is this country. It really
Thank you.
So, but I also know that's easy to lose.
It is easy to lose. Utah has a pretty good culture of this, and I don't mean at the legislature. Just like I also have lived in a few states, and Utah has a nice culture. Here are some other things that are somewhat unique to Utah that I think help with what you're talking about here. And one of those is the very part-time nature of our legislature. Utah has the shortest annual legislative session of any state in the country. It's 45 calendar days. That's only 33 working days if you take out Saturday and Sunday. That's not to say we don't work on those days, but, we do things like this. I think that is a major contributor because serving in our legislature is really hard. And we don't have term limits in Utah, but we just, you see in Washington, people tend to stick around, and only very few people stay in the Utah legislature for very long, because it's not a job you can have, right? You can't go there and come out richer than you went in, right? Anybody that serves, they have to take time away from their family and their real career, and I think that natural churn that it provides in our legislature, I think helps out. I think there's less of an incentive in Utah specifically, but probably in states with very part-time legislatures in general. I think that makes it easier to do that long-term reach-out focus. There's much less concern about something is in the news and I've got to, stand up on a box and shout. I don't think we get as much of that here, and I think the part-time nature of our legislature is a big part of that.
Yeah. Going to the part-time, if you're a part-time legislator, that means you have a full-time job somewhere else, which means you have to live with the bills you pass. Sometimes if you're a full-time policymaker, you might not have to actually live with a bill that you pass or a policy that you made, but we do. So.
Yeah. If you don't have a job.
Yeah.
Right? Or you don't have any employees. There are plenty of legislators who are retired, who are, but even the ones that don't particularly work day to day, they either own businesses or, go ahead. Okay, this will be our
I wonder, does the state legislature have anything to do with the plan for Little Cottonwood Canyon?
Does the state have any? The legislature had plans up Little Cottonwood Canyon. The answer is yes. The road up Little Cottonwood Canyon is a state highway. It's a state road. The ski resorts that are up there are major economic drivers for the state. So yes, the state will be part of the traffic solution to that problem. I don't have a preferred solution. I don't think that there's been nearly enough discussion at the legislative level about what that would look like. And I know there's a lot talked about the news, and some people prefer a gondola and some people don't. I really don't know. There's never been a legislative proposal on any of those things. There's just been a lot of talk, but nobody has come to the legislature asking for money. There's never been a request to appropriate things for that. There's been a lot of study. The Department of Transportation believes that the gondola is the most cost-effective way to move people up and down that canyon. But even if we don't do some pushback I hear about the gondola is we should not be investing whatever $1 billion or whatever it will take to do it in order to benefit those ski resorts, and all that's well and good. But if we don't do the gondola, we're going to improve the road, and that will also be $1 billion. Everything has a cost, right? If it's railroad, or we just say, sorry, people are not going to be able to get up and down that canyon. And I think that would be a problem because those, winter recreation is a big part of Utah's year-round economy.
Yeah, it's a problem with multifaceted, and I represent some of Sandy, and some of the folks in that live in Sandy have some very strong feelings about it, as well they should, and then you get into not just how do we get people up there, but what about parking, and how will you? What about the neighborhoods right there, and how will that affect them, and how will you get all those cars? And there's a lot to talk about, and I don't mention avalanches. Avalanches, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of concerns, and there's a lot of people with opinions, and I certainly have not come down 100% on what I just think we shouldn't make a decision until we've really got good information.
Yeah, that mirrors my position. But you guys are, that road that goes up there is in fact the most avalanche-prone road in the country, right? And do you know how we do avalanche control now? We, on the north side of the canyon, we take a howitzer, literally, right? And we fire shells onto the other side of the mountain. If you've ever been hiking up, if you get past up there where you go up to Albion Basin, if you go hiking up to Secret Lake or Lake Catherine, you'll pass little signs that say there might be unexploded ordnance that you find in this mountain. Please don't touch it, right? It's because we're firing heavy weaponry into the canyon to try to do avalanche control. I think that's one reason why UDOT likes the gondola option. If there's an avalanche up there now, whoever is at that ski resort cannot get down, right? Anybody north of up the canyon. And so the gondola, at the very least, provides a way to not have to worry about the avalanches to that degree. If it costs money, the legislature will make the final decision. Good question. I want to thank you guys all for coming. Unless there's some urgent pressing thing that we had here, I appreciate you spending an hour with us on a Saturday. We really appreciate it. So I think you guys all know there's a primary election coming up on Tuesday. Neither Susan nor I are on the ballot, but there are a lot of really important races. We've talked some about Congress in here. Maybe I've been a little bit too hard on them, but we don't have a congressional race here, but our state has a U.S. Senate race. That's an important race. We'll be electing a new governor. So there are races. Please, I encourage you to vote in the coming election primary, and again in November. But also, just because this has like the marquee races, right, governor and senator and attorney general, those positions are not more important in your day-to-day lives than the people who are running for your city council, right? We had several issues here where the answer lies with your city council, or your school board member. The chair of the Jordan School District Board joined our meeting a little bit later. She's running for the legislature now. And Tracy, I just want to acknowledge you. Hello, everyone. Tracy Miller in the back. So those elections matter too. So government in our form only is successful when people are engaged. And that gets to what I was talking about with Utah's culture earlier. So thank you for being engaged enough to come, to participate. You'll be, I think, probably at 2 more of these before we go. And we're losing Susan in the legislature. Again, it's just part of that wonderful churn. So somebody new will be standing up here next year with us as we do these meetings, and we hope that you'll continue to come because we want to be accountable to you. And that really gets, I think, when I first ran for office, I talked to my wife, I was like, I don't want to be, like you see people, it's just like they have to be there, and I don't want to turn into that. And so one promise that I made to you and to me when I was elected is that I would continue to hold these meetings because I want to be accountable to you, and you are the biggest check on my ability to exercise power on your behalf. So thank you for coming. I hope you'll come to these in the future, and I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Happy Father's Day to those who celebrate, and we'll see you. We'll talk to you again soon.